what is an interpreter? Well, there are two types, which is one of the big things. There's first-person interpreters, which I think is what the majority of people who come to Mount Vernon expect when they find me, and those are the people who, you know, my name is Martha Washington, and this is 1799, and that's a first-person interpreter. They're playing a character, and they're pretending to be 1799. They're actors, and I'm a third-person interpreter. I dress in the clothing, and I do the farm work, and I run the mill, but I'm Katie. This is the year 2010. And the reason I'm dressed up like this and doing the work is to show people how it was done. But I speak to folks in a modern context. That way I can say this is what happened after Washington's death, and kind of I can bring it to a modern context. And grist is just a fancy old-fashioned word for grain. So it's a grain mill, and it's going to be grinding things like flour and corn for baking and cooking.
Washington built his mill between 1770 and 1771, and he built it after he had switched from growing tobacco to growing wheat. So initially he had no use of a large grist mill, but once he started growing wheat as a cash crop, he realized pretty quickly he could earn more money if he could turn it into a luxury flour. And that's what he did. This was not just a mill for local products. He was making an export grade luxury flour called superfine, which is as white as any flour you'll buy in the grocery store today.
There was a man named Oliver Evans who invented a system for automatically processing flour. Before it was invented, there were a bunch of different machines to do the various stages, cleaning the flour and sorting the flour, sifting it, but they weren't connected. So in order to use these machines, you would have to have people with bags and barrels collect all the flour from one and carry them to the next and pour them all in. It was really time consuming and labor intensive. So Evans was the first one to connect all the machines using little elevators he made with little cups that were all water powered and carried the grain all around the mill, and Washington was one of the first people to install it in his own mill in 1791. What are the ingredients of whiskey? If I tell you, you can't make it because it is moonshine. It's going to be rye flour primarily. He had a rye-based whiskey, cornmeal, and malted barley flour. Well, it wasn't his idea. It was at the very end of his life, and he had a Scottish farm manager named James Anderson, who was a master whiskey distiller back in Scotland. And since Washington had plenty of grain and water, Anderson wanted to make whiskey. So eventually he convinced Washington to do it, and they built the distillery in 1797. What do they use flour for? And the kids, they have no idea that flour is going into cake. I guess their parents don't bake, the kids don't bake. Kids today, I see them at Mount Vernon with PSPs, and they're out and they're playing and they're completely ignoring what's going on. And as a society, we're really kind of losing how to entertain ourselves and keep busy. So and I'm sure he would agree, it's important to get kids out while they're still young and actually teach them about the world. We get adults who come down to our farm and they see sheep and they don't know what they are. More often than not, they think our sheep are goats, or I've had teenagers who think that they're llamas. I've several women who think they're cows, and it's sad. And I really think that we need to get out more. Come down on the farm sometimes. So it's really important for kids and adults alike to come here and see how things used to be, and see how once upon a time grain got to your table. We all think of Washington as president, and one of our biggest things to do here is explain how he wasn't just the president and the general of our army. He was a farmer, he was an entrepreneur, he was a miller, a distiller. He did all these different things, and first and foremost, one of our big things to say is that he thought of himself as a farmer. That was his passion. He had a really strong work ethic, and he was always trying new things. He was very innovative, but unlike some people, he wasn't just going to keep trying even though it failed. He was the only founding father who wasn't in debt when he died, and he tries to make wine at one point. He spends 2 years trying to plant grapes. Neither year works out. And instead of sinking all the money into it year after year, he stopped and he went on to something better. It's not that he gave up, but it's that he understood, if this isn't going to work out for me economically, I need something different. One visitor told me once, she comes here all the time, and she said, I learn 3 new things every time I come to Mount Vernon. And I like to hope that whenever people talk to me, they walk away with at least 3 new things that they've learned, and hopefully will remember at least one.